Well, earlier this week, the Finance Minister, Dr. Tuforson, presented this administration's economic policy and budget statement to Parliament. For a lot of people, the critical question here is that has it been able to create the required confidence in the economy going forward? And what about businesses? They do matter a lot. Do they see this budget as business-friendly based on those tax policy measures and revenue measures and incentives that the minister has offered to them? What are we hearing about the market reacting negatively to some of the measures in the news about our fiscal situation for last year? And what are the real situations on the ground? Tonight, on PM Express Business Edition, we talk about the 2025 budget and whether it gives some hope to businesses out there going forward for this year, and whether it can bring about the necessary growth or government's targets are too ambitious in this budget. This is what we're talking about on PM Express, engaging a finance person, a commerce person, and somebody in the accounting auditing space as well. All these things wrapped up here on PM Express Business Edition. We're right back after this break. And welcome to PM Express Business Edition. And you've had the presentation, you've had the political debate. It's time for businesses, those who matter in this economy, to share their thoughts on this 2025 budget. Does it really stimulate confidence among businesses? And also the fact that, can it be described as a business-friendly budget in terms of the revenue, the taxes, the growth projections, how government is intending to spend, and whether indeed it can stimulate the right growth that all of us are looking for? I have with me on Zoom, he is a senior country partner of accounting and financial firm PwC Ghana, Vish Ashagbo, connecting with us via Zoom, going to give us some accounting perspective and also the revenue and the tax numbers. And also in studio with me, I have my uncle Joe. He was maybe here in the studio, and I appreciate your time so much. And the weather was quite terrible indeed. I appreciate that my guest still managed to be here for us to have a discussion. I really appreciate so much. And also the Chief Executive of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, he's here with me in studio. And let me kickstart with you, industry first. I was at a program, moderated a program this morning, and the sentiments were quite mixed. I initially thought that, for the first time, businesses were all given a thumbs up, but it was quite a mixed sentiment this morning, afternoon, when we're engaging businesses on their concerns, their tax issues, and all the rest. But let me first just quick thought on Chamber of Commerce CEO as well. Your quick overview of the budget, coming from the perspective of the industry, commerce as well. What are your concerns?
Well, just as you said, I think it's a mixed feeling in a way. For me, also, it's a good start. Obviously, just like any normal budget, there will be some opportunities and there will be some inherent risk. That is basically what we are seeing. In terms of the opportunities, I also see a clear case of trying to improve the business environment, enhance our productive sector through some of the policies that were enumerated. Of course, you know about the taxes. It was one of our major concerns that we raised, and as part of the Chamber of Commerce's input into the budget, we raised all these taxes, i.e. the e-levy. For me, e-levy, is undoubtedly the most nuisance tax that I've ever seen in this country because of how it impacts both consumption and also production. It distorts consumption, it distorts production. So we have raised concerns on the very day that the e-levy was introduced. We clearly indicated that it's not going to help business, it's not going to help consumers. To the extent that even the rate was high, through our advocacy and other this thing, we were able to bring it down to 1%. So if they are taking it out, for me, I think it's fair comment. It's a fair deal. And others also, the COVID-19 as well, through the tax reform. We have said it over and over again that our VAT structure is too complicated. It doesn't enhance any compliance. People don't even understand. A structure that you are combining both the standard VAT and most of these levies that you cannot claim input VAT on translate into direct cost to businesses. So I was expecting that there will be a straightforward comment on what exactly they are going to do. But to defer it to a period that you are not even aware, it means that within this time, you're still going to be paying the tax of the VAT of 22%. I don't know when they are going to take it out. So by and large, looking at the numbers, the macroeconomic indicators that they put forward, the inflation, even though I have issues with it, maybe we'll discuss
yeah, we'll get there. But these are just quick issues. Let me bring in Mr. Joe Jackson, Chief Executive of Deals Finance, from the financial space as well. Your quick reaction to this budget.
Well, listen, first of all, it was going to be a high-wire balancing act. Things were going to be tough. And in fact, what we're looking for, a lot of us were looking, how are they going to manage this? And to the extent that it was managed, to the extent that they navigated the most obvious pitfalls, to the extent that the headline number, which was the budget deficit and the primary deficits, were all within what we hoped for. We're saying, not too bad. Key thing was that they're not spending their way out of trouble. They're not unduly adding onto the debt stock. It is said when you're a hole, the first thing you do is to stop digging. There was evidence that they've stopped digging. There was evidence that we were going to have a bigger commitment towards keeping expenditure under control. But you know, the very things that they told us about in the early part of the budget reading, the challenges we have, the challenges with arrears, the challenges with SOEs, the challenges with, and when we say challenges with debts of ECG, debt of Cocoa Board, the arrears factor, the amount of debt servicing we have to do this year and the following year. Those very things frighten all of us. And they frighten us because the challenge is, what happens if things, since this is a balancing act, if things don't go the way they should, then you should be worried.
And it has happened before.
It has
where certain taxes were taken away and another one was brought back again. And the cycle, some of us.
Yes. And so one of the things that, as a prudent business person, you go into, you receive this budget with what I would call cautious optimism. The fact that, first of all, the powers that be, they're saying, we are committed to keeping things under control. We're committed to paying back. Part of that commitment is even the reduction in interest rates. That huge effort to get interest rates under control is a commitment to reduce the amount we're going to spend servicing our debt. Part of the reduction of the size of government, 60 ministers, lower numbers of appointees, right, is also it's part of that commitment. There's another part of the commitment which, as private sector, we should be worried about. The huge arrears.
And how they're going to finance it as well.
Not just, first of all, the first thing that's going to come is that verification process, which means that nobody's going to get paid anytime soon. Now, in the financial sector, it should worry you because potential for NPLs even growing bigger than they were before.
Mr. Jackson, let me just do some quick recap for the benefit of our audience in terms of some real numbers, and my producers will put that on the screen for us. Basically, first to look at the growth numbers as well, and my producers will just put that on the screen for us in terms of the growth numbers, what the minister was looking at, and even a trend, trend in terms of what they're looking at, how things will be for us by the end of this year. And so these are the numbers. If you look at, in terms of growth, overall growth, they're looking at 4% by the end of the year, without or with non-oil growth, 4.8 as well. End of year inflation numbers, 23 last year, or 23 actually, as we speak. Forgive me, but moving from the 20 range to actually 11.9. Some are saying it is quite steep as well. Primary balance negative 3.9 to about 1.5%. And in terms of import cover, again, if you look at some of the numbers, they are good, but they are going down from 4 months to 3 months of import cover. Some challenges there, again, if you don't want to be a prophet of doom, the impact on the local currency as well. Let's quickly go down and look at, in terms of the tax revenue measures, if you can broaden a little bit for us, in terms of the proposed tax that has been abolished. And if you can see, you can look at the 10% withholding tax as well from betting activities, electronic levy, e-levy of 1%, value-added tax on motor vehicle insurance policy, and also 1.5 withholding tax on winning of unprocessed gold, of processed gold by small-scale miners. Let's look at the tax measures in there. Increasing individual income tax fee rate to reflect approved daily minimum wage, increase in the growth. And so these are some of the proposed revenue and tax measures that government is trying to raise or to put in place to get more revenue for this year. And there are some who are already raising questions about it, and also other proposed revenue initiatives embark on sustainable and rigorous tax education in terms of compliance and all those things. Some interesting numbers there in terms of when it comes to the proposed tax measures the government is looking at. But Uncle Joe, let me quickly bring in Visha Shagbo to just join us. And Vish, I know that you've done a pre-budget survey. Visha Shagbo is the senior country partner at PwC Ghana. And for you, I mean, the eye of an accountant, the eye of an advisory person, when you look at this budget, what are your concerns? Hello, Vish, if you can.
Hello, George. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm saying that from the perspective of an advisory person and all those things, what are your concerns if you look at this whole budget document? Already, I've engaged some businesses. They are worried about the tax measures, and they are not that comfortable with that. And even the picture about the fiscal situation for last year. What, from the bigger picture, from advisory, an accountant, finance group, you've done this thing for over years. What are your concerns when you look at this budget?
So, George, I wouldn't refer immediately to concerns. We would align more with what Mr. Jackson just outlined, because, you know, the minister, when he delivered his speech, prefaced it by saying that we have to confront some fundamental challenges and that some difficult decisions need to be made. So it's been quite a delicate balancing act. The key is to get the environment more stable. He did say that in his consultations with business people, the two primary concerns were price and exchange rate stability. And I think that's absolutely right. But we cannot achieve that within one budget cycle. And as you and I have discussed before, growth indicators are nice, but there are other things we need to consider, some of which Mr. Jackson and others have already mentioned. The arrears problem, the debt problem, all of those things come together. And if we're not very deliberate and very careful about how we proceed, we could end up shooting ourselves in the foot. So from our perspective, we believe that it's a well-balanced budget. Yes, some industry folks may not have been too happy about the tax situation, but we do need to continue to mobilize revenue because we have obligations that we need to meet. So far, so good. In terms of what is on paper, we like it. The key will be in the implementation, and that's always where we've had our challenges. So we hope this time around it will actually work out as planned.
Mr. Shagbo, let me focus more on the tax measures that government has proposed.
Yeah.
What do you make of these measures? Are they, because there are some who will say that you want to go on that tangent of being assured that you can go and sleep and these lines are going to get you the revenue, rather than if I could go on this local balance, and if I'm right with my choice of words, some will say, that's what some people are saying. I stand to be corrected or educated.
No, I don't think so. I think the tax measures have been carefully thought through and are being carefully assessed. So that is why you see, for example, the changes to the VAT regime have not been made immediately. Now, everybody agrees that the VAT system needs to be overhauled, but that needs to be carefully assessed because, as we've already said, it's a delicate balance. So again, I take the point that the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce made that they had hoped that there would have been some immediate relief on that front. I don't think it's a trial and error thing. I think it's been carefully thought through. The increases that have been projected will take some doing, but if I read the narrative and the initiatives that they've put forward, I think it's possible, but it's a question of how effective we can get the implementation to run. On paper, it looks good, but implementation is always the key.
And how are we going to get around that challenge of implementation? Because there are some who've also said that it appears that it's something that they are trying to wait and see how things will pan out. And that's where the concerns are that maybe just like what we've seen before, taxes were removed mid-year or another budget, another taxes was brought back. In the past, it has happened before.
So it's a matter of our collective will, the will of government, the will of the business community, the will of the citizens generally. But I think there's a real sense this time that something has to give. Now, if you take it all the way from what was in the government's or the current government's manifesto, the conversations we all had at the National Economic Dialogue, the consultations that the government went through in putting together this budget, I think that there's a general consensus that something has to give. We cannot continue with our old ways. So to the extent that everybody is willing to play their part and actually live with some of these difficult decisions. And again, Minister said it quite clearly at the beginning of his speech, that it's time to make some difficult choices. And to the extent that we all acknowledge that, then I think it should work. There's initiatives that we've not seen before about, for example, public education on the need for people to pay their taxes. Minister spoke about, I think he said, quarterly dialogue with the business community and the GRA and the Ministry of Finance. So I think all of those things are designed to bring everybody to the table. And so far as there's transparency, there's a consensus, I think we should be able to get there. And those things have not been there previously. We just need to stick with it and hopefully with the will behind it, political will, and then the will from the business community, we'll be able to get there.
I'll come back to you later, Vish, on what should we be doing going forward to ensure that we get things right, because there are some who are also worried that maybe the external markets are not going to help us, and therefore we may have to change course. But I'll come back to you. I mean, Uncle Joe Jackson, I mean, for you businesses, do I also get and that's what he was trying to mirror, that, okay, you admit that there's a challenge, and therefore you are prepared to take the bitter pill?
There has to be some pain. We're not going to get out of this in a painless way. Whatever was going to happen, somebody was going to go away from the table unhappy because they're going to pay more tax. You know, as much as a collective, as Ghanaians, we all said, we don't like the e-levy, take it off. We don't like COVID-19, take it off. We don't like betting tax, take it off. And we could go through the list. Each tax handle taken off meant there was a hole. That hole had to be filled. Or with the drastic drop in expenditure would also not be good. So it was a balancing act, right? And unfortunately, who bore the brunt? It is going to be the mining sector. Some of us will say, well, it's okay. They've enjoyed more rent than they should. If you look at retention, mining sector retention is less than 10%, especially from the gold mine. Gold sector. I know the Chamber of Mines is going to come throwing
come hard at you. But I mean, again, do you blame them? I mean, that is the law. And don't forget that most of their inputs...
It's not about apportioning blame.
Okay, all right.
It's that we are in a crisis. And who should bear some of the pain? And we're saying the pain should be borne by the mining sector. Why should it be borne by the mining sector? Because for all the other sectors, It's the one sector that has been exporting. It's the one sector that means that their revenues have been insulated from all the turmoil locally, right? He represents institutions whose revenues are all in cedis. They can't bear any more pain. So to that extent, we will go with the flow. If we're talking about refunds, right, and capping refunds at a level which will engineer some more funds, notice my words, engineer some more funds into the system to take up for the gap of the e-levy, I'm in support of it. If you say, so what the point we're making is that not that many taxes were taken off. Not really.
Yeah.
Not that many taxes were taken off because we've got to pay the tax. And you notice that there's a renewed commitment to increasing our tax to GDP from 13 to 15%. Now, what they're trying to do is greater compliance, drawing more people into the tax net, simplifying VAT, removing the multiple VAT levels so that everybody can pay a similar regime. And you see, all those they're tinkering with the system rather than making any radical change. Partly because we are still under an IMF regime. You cannot change certain things without going back to the agreement that we've all signed up to as a nation when we were desperate. So, as a business, and looking at the financial sector, I would say there are lots of things to be worried about.
Like?
The arrears. I was talking about the arrears. The arrears before they showed the numbers. Those arrears are huge. But remember, those arrears, a lot of it, for example, it represents money that has been borrowed from the financial sector. Verifying, making sure there's value for money. All these represent slowdowns. And even the specter that some of it may not even be paid. When you talk about ECG, there are companies that owe.
But Mr. Jackson, just a quick interjection. I mean, I tend to be again educated from the accountants when it comes to public finance, and some who said that whether the budget is on cash basis or accrual. Some are saying that some of these arrears, if are for projects, they will pay back. It's not money that if I can make that street argument or street talk. Or
listen, the one thing we know about our projects is that they were not selected based on return on investment.
Okay.
They were selected based on political expediency most of the time. And they were selected based on how much would be wheedled out of the projects to further other pockets apart from the public purse. So I don't want to go into that argument because you and I know that argument won't carry any weight outside a theoretical space. Those arrears are real. Those arrears are owed to Ghanaians. When you go to ECG, ECG owes money to Ghanaian companies. So when you talk about those arrears, remember that there's an organization, there's an institution, there are real people behind these arrears who will be suffering and complaining and screaming and shouting that the government gave me a contract and didn't pay. The government gave me a contract, promised it to pay, and the politicians didn't pay. They're out of the office. I don't know how we were going to get paid. And because of the partisan nature of our contracting process, as soon as your, in quotes, party is out of power, it's a zillion times harder to get your money.
Mr. Boaji, I mean, did you want more? Because from what Mr. Jackson is telling me, it appears that, yes, some taxes were taken off. Did you still want more taxes to be reviewed? Because there's a school of thought that, okay, lessen the tax burden to businesses, they would grow, they will expand, they will employ more people, they will end up paying more taxes, even with the low rate as well.
Well, George, as has been said, I think we all have to sacrifice one way or the other. Much as business, we would have loved to, most of the taxes, even growth and sustainability levy when it was introduced, we all thought it was a tax that's going to burden the private sector. So, I mean, in some of our communication, we asked that those taxes should also be taken. And of course, the special export levy, import levy, and all those things. But obviously, we also need money to develop the economy. We cannot take all the taxes because that is where we are getting money from. Much as we are happy, they are expanding the tax net by, I mean, more education, more discussion, more collaboration, enhancing compliance. I think really we also have to look at how they can also balance the equation, because the expenditure that we have, some of them, there's nothing you can do. Government will have to pay workers.
Salaries, compensation.
Salaries, government roles must be considered, hospitals and all those things. And the money should come from somewhere. So we are all balancing the situation. We don't want a situation where they will take away all these taxes, and then some of the benefit that ordinary Ghanaian would have gotten from some of these projects will also not be there. So for businesses, I think that for me, the most important thing for me when the budget was being read was to have a very stable economy. For now, once we get the stability right, then we begin to think about higher growth. So when people were talking about that, the growth that they have announced is lower than what was.
Because you were expecting that it was
obviously
cascade.
First you need the stability. If you have growth and your economy is not stable, that growth will not take you anywhere. So it's key. The revenue is important. So some tax will have to stay. As I said, the other sectors will have to bear some brand by increasing some of the taxes from 1% to 3%.
Some of them are your members as well. Yes, they won't be happy.
That's what I'm saying. They may obviously not be happy. And all of us, we are also not happy because some of the things that we were expecting, and even some of the risk that are inherent in there. If you look at how they are going to finance the budget deficit, largely is domestic.
Boring.
So 36.9 billion of this deficit is going to be borrowed from the short-term end, which means that the government is going to be on the market almost every day, high appetite. And once you do that, the likelihood that the TB rate will go up, and once it does, all the other rates will also go up.
We have a finance person. I'll be coming to you on the TB argument.
Obviously,
all the dynamics that are going on.
On that line, government is going to crowd out the private sector. Because you are getting 36.9 billion from these banks. It should be to the private sector to stimulate private sector activity. So we all have to support. We all have to sacrifice one way or the other. And I think that it's a call for all of us that this is the situation we find ourselves. It is not for Ato. It is not for President Mahama. It is for Ghana. What is it that we all have to do? Sacrifice a bit and get us, all of us, going.
Mr. Jackson, I mean, there have been back and forth arguments and debates about the T-bill issue. And there were some who were waiting for this budget to get a sense about the outlook. There are some who are worried that still going to borrow more and all that has happened on the T-bills market. What are your thoughts on, one, the T-bill argument that is going on, and the fact that if you look at this budget, government is still going to borrow more from the domestic market?
Well, first of all, I want to applaud my colleague for at least accepting to bear. All of us have to accept to bear more pain. Listen, there are people, we all were complaining about the taxes at the port. Nothing was done. Those numerous taxes, nothing was done. They're still there. The traders still have to deal with it. But on this steel bill issue, listen, again, if you understand and we talk about a balancing act and hard decisions, what harder decision than to make sure we don't go into another domestic debt?
By bringing down rates, when you have corresponding indicators do not support, inflation is high, policy rate is high.
If there's an inflation gap, right?
Yeah.
It means somebody is taking pain. That's what it means.
Investors who are buying, the real return is negative for them.
Exactly. So somebody
you think that they will continue buying these papers? But when you've told us in your budget that you'll still be going that way.
But listen to this, right? Why is it that each time they go to the market, it is oversubscribed and the rates are coming down? All the Minister of Finance is doing to date is he goes to the market and he says, if I went to the market and I wanted 5 billion, I will take 5 billion. and leave everything else on the table. And if rates are falling because of that, we can't still turn around and complain.
The governor is worried about the impact of this on the Ghana city. If you follow the market over the past 2 days,
it is going to be a balancing act.
The city has started experiencing some shocks.
The city's shocks, I suspect, are a little bit more external. They are shocks that are being experienced because of the harsh numbers we are now
fiscal.
Coming to see when the numbers for last year, how all the indicators were missed in a bad way. That has an effect, right? But that effect is going to be balanced if this government shows clearly that I'm going to stay on the straight and narrow. I'm going to drive rates down. I'm going to ensure that I don't have another domestic debt. I'm going to keep the cost of debt servicing down. Now, you see, we can't have our cake and eat it. Something has to give. There has to be a balancing act. So for me, I agree with the Minister of Finance and agree with his actions because he's taking a certain course of action and he's saying that I am going to reduce my debt burden so that I free up some space for other things. I am going to ensure that we don't go into another, because the worst thing that can happen is somewhere down the line for us to say we have challenges servicing our debt. And he's already told you how much of the debt is coming due this year. Right? It is a balancing act. Remember that some of the debt is going to be repaid in dollars. So if the CD takes a dive, he also takes a hit. But he has to balance something.
Mr. Jackson, I mean, the fiscal number is already being contested by the former administration and all there is. But for a layman, you want to ask that, where was the IMF when all these numbers showed that they were not on track? I mean, again, the argument about the cash and the accrual and the commitment issues.
The IMF is not sitting here every day.
But they come on staff review.
Yes, but when was the last review? And when did things go south? Things went south.
Just in the last 2 months or something?
3 months, exactly. So we
can the fund not be blamed for this
challenge? How can the fund
because
be blamed?
You were under a fund program.
You see, you're under a fund program, but you have to show the discipline. What did we do? We did exactly what we said we wouldn't do, which is go on a spending binge in an election year.
But not on the argument again they're making is that this is not on cash, but again, and you are a finance person, these are project commitments.
Listen, they are commitments.
Yeah.
They have to be paid. This cash business, it won't fly. And part of our problems are that we we make commitments and we don't account for them properly. Right? That commitment you've made, somebody has taken a financial decision based on it. That commitment you've made, somebody has gone out and expended resources. A financial institution has loaned out money. Shouldn't that be part of the books?
Okay.
That won't fly. Listen, there was spending in the last quarter that we all have to admit was reckless. We all have to admit short. And the IMF has already indicated that we're not going to pass the next inspection. With these numbers, how are you going to pass the next inspection? What's your primary balance?
You think that the fourth review we are not going to pass based on?
No, you can't. Look, what was your primary balance at the end of December? Negative 3.3%. What had you promised? Positive 1.5%. Did you meet that? How much were you going to borrow on the domestic market? Did you meet that? And I could go on and on and on.
And that could again be bad for us because we know how critical this fund program and their comment on the economy has helped, at least choosing the words of stabilize things. If it's clear that
it will be balanced by saying that since the new regime, you know how we speak, since the new regime took over, there's been a renewed commitment to meet our numbers.
I'll come back to you about how this means for push for some people that let's extend the program because it has implications even meeting the NDA targets and all that. But let me bring in Mr. Shagba again. I mean, Vish, if you look at the revenue and the tax measures, do you think that we'll end up hitting or getting the required revenue at the end of the year?
I think it's definitely going to be a challenge, but I guess we'll take some comfort from the Commissioner General's statements. He's confident. The minister is confident. So obviously, with that will, there's got to be a way. Like I said, and others have also said, there's a large amount of people outside the net. And to the extent that we can actually bring them in, and I see GRA now talking about deploying digital tools, etc., to broaden the net, then there's hope that we can actually hit those numbers. You've also mentioned the increase in taxes on the mining sector, or specifically the levies. And then, of course, the extension of the stabilization levy and the special import levies. So we have to do what we can to bring in the numbers. But I guess I take some comfort from the optimism that the Commissioner General has indicated. We must, something has to give, like we've all said. And we look forward to those numbers being achieved.
Mr. Shah, what are the key indicators that you look out for in classifying a budget statement as being business friendly? Would the taxes be one? Would be how government is trying to finance the deficit one? And let's do the 101 here in respect to this 2025 budget from the perspective of an advisory person. Would you see this budget as business friendly?
Yes, George. So now you've spoken about a number of indicators. The deficit is one. The financing is another, but more importantly, the policy initiatives, right? So the numbers are important because it gives you a sense of actually whether we are being disciplined or intend to be disciplined or not. The budget is a statement of intent. What really matters is what you do. So if you go back to 2024, for example, the indicators were reasonable, but actually the outturn has been a bit problematic. And that's a matter of implementation and our own ability to keep to the disciplines that we set for ourselves. So directly to your question as to whether this is a business-friendly budget, I think if you take everything together, our view is that it is. And it's not just because of the numbers. The numbers are a part, because notwithstanding the fact that there are challenges embedded in there, it gives a signal that we are going to work towards getting out of the difficulties that currently face us. So that's one side of it. Now, if you look at the deficit that we're projecting for 2025, I think about 4.1% or so on a cash basis and 3.1% on a commitment basis. That's a good indicator, right? Because it indicates that we're going to try and gradually align our expenditures and our revenues so that we begin to live within our means, because that's what historically has caused all these problems. But then beyond that are the policy initiatives around the things we'd like to do in agriculture, the things we'd like to do around industrialization, to promote exports, import substitution, infrastructure development. All of those things ultimately assist the environment for private business. Now, as I said earlier, you can't do all of that in 1 year, but the signals are good. We just need to keep to it. So from that perspective, we see that this budget is business friendly. It's not delivered yet, but the signposting is good. And if we can maintain this trajectory, then ultimately, in a few years' time, hopefully we should get back on track. Because again, as has been said already, we have this debt problem staring us in the face, including the arrears and all those things we need to take care of. So so far, so good. It's a good beginning, but again, let's see how the implementation goes. But the policies we need to look at together with the actual numbers that have been projected, and to the extent that these policies are going to help us export more, import less, then I would say it's business friendly.
Interesting. I'll come to you, Mr. Jackson, very soon. But also, I mean, your work involves about dealing with these investors outside, these traders and all the rest, in terms of the advice that you do. already, if what we are monitoring from the Bloomberg News or the wires is accurate enough, there has been some response to the numbers, and the reactions are not good. Already, our bonds and all the rest, and even some are saying that the cedi. How should we get around the challenge about this negative reaction from the market if what is being reported is that accurate?
So George, I suspect the negative reactions are born out of, should I say, surprise or disappointment in terms of how 2024 has turned out, as opposed to the 2025 budget itself, right? Because if we've ended up so far off target on significant indicators, then for your average investor looking at Ghana from overseas, what it says is that we still have not learned our lessons, right? So we continue on the path of indiscipline. So naturally, that's going to affect the bond prices or the yields on the bonds, because now there's concern about our ability to honor our obligations as and when they fall due. In actual fact, the minister did mention that about the payments that are due 2025, and then the fact that 2027, 2028 are also heavy. So obviously, if you're a bondholder at this point in time, you are a little less comfortable than you were perhaps before you saw the final numbers for 2024. And therefore, the one of the key things becomes how to instill confidence in how we actually deliver 2025. So I'm hoping that by the time we get to the mid-year review, there will be some positive indications that we are actually on track in terms of what 2025 performance is against the budget. Hopefully, we can even do better. And then I think that'll begin to settle the market. So overall, it's a question of your credibility. So we've had nice budgets in the past, but what we've delivered has been quite far off what we told the world. And I think what we're seeing is a reaction to that. As you said earlier, notwithstanding the presence of the IMF, it seems that things have gone haywire. This is not the IMF's doing, it's our own doing. And therefore, the world is watching and thinking that, well, has Ghana learned its lessons or not? The jury is still out, but I think and hope that for 2025, we'll be able to calm the nerves as we go through the year.
Mr. Shebo, quick one. I mean, on the bit of the IMF, I engaged the Minister of State at the Finance Ministry, Abdul Siyasare, and she was contesting these fiscal numbers that what the fund will bring out as the final numbers would not be what has been put out. But again, some are saying that we all sought solace, if I can use that expression, that you had a big brother who is there. And I know Uncle Jackson would disagree with me, that we had a big brother there. We thought that, listen, the big brother will ensure that even if there are slippages, they might not be that big. Isn't that again a big concern for everyone?
George, to the best of my knowledge, the IMF, yes, although they do their own research and have their own numbers, these are our numbers, and our numbers come from the Statistical Service, the Ministry of Finance, the Bank of Ghana, et cetera, et cetera. So all that's going to happen is we are going to present our numbers to the IMF. They have given us our targets, and they've tied certain benefits or certain measures to our attainment of those indicators. We are the masters of our own destiny. The IMF is just supporting us. So when you say Big Brother IMF, all they're doing is giving us advice, right? And they're telling us that if you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we will do 6, 7, and 8 for you. So if we have not done our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then the big question becomes, to what extent they'll continue to support us at the 6, 7, 8. So I think the understanding of the role of the IMF maybe needs to be clarified. The IMF doesn't come up with their own numbers. These are our numbers. Yes, they may track them, they may assess them in some way, shape, or form, but we manage our own affairs, and all they are doing is saying to us, if you do this, we'll do this for you. If you do that, we'll do that for you. So again, it's back to us and our own discipline, so to speak. So we'll see what happens when the fourth review comes up, but we're quite worried about the fact that we've missed all these targets. I'm not quite sure what the answer is going to be, so it will be interesting to see.
What are your concerns, your fears? I mean, I'll come to Uncle Jackson. What are your fears? Because we know that the cycle, and if you miss the target, it has implications for additional funding to you as a country.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, and we all know what impact that will have on the exchange rate and the budget. And I mean, to be honest, it doesn't bear thinking about. But I'm hoping that there can be some some adjustments some way, somehow. And as Mr. Jackson said, maybe if they will accept the fact that we have a renewed commitment to discipline, that may help. But honestly, our track record is not good in that regard. And we need to get our house in order.
Uncle Jackson, I mean, do you think that the basis of the final numbers or the provisional numbers for 2024 justify argument for then maybe a possible program extension? Because if these are the numbers, again, it will have implications on this fourth review.
Program extension for discussion. It has to be. The numbers have turned out a lot worse than we expected. So, and it's not as simple as you demand an extension and you get an extension, right? Or it's not as simple as somebody comes to recommend an extension and you accept it. It has to be negotiated. And it may come with certain, and based on how, in quotes, we have misbehaved and we have been indisciplined in the second half of 2024, it could have implications. But at this moment, nobody should rule it out. Right?
Should we start drumming, let the market, because some are saying that if it comes as a shock, the rippling impact, should we now make it known that, listen, this is the problem?
It cannot come as a shock.
Okay.
Why would it come as a shock? Okay. It won't come as a shock because the numbers are bad, the arrears are bad, the debts owed by the government are bigger than we thought. And so would we need support? Yes. Would we need help?
Would you advise government that, listen, kickstart the process for a possible program extension, or then you have to front load and do more of an aggressive fiscal consolidation program in the year, which could come with own shocks for the economy?
Listen, at this moment, if I was advising the government,
advising the finance minister,
I would say put that on the table and put out a feeler and see what is, float a kite, put out a feeler and see what the response is like. Right? But on this budget, there are a number of things.
Yeah.
Clear is the extent that the budget set a tone for a stable exchange rate. For now, it does.
You see that's also business friendly?
That's business friendly.
Okay.
In any description, that's business friendly. Does it set the tone for stability in prices? Yes. Does it attempt to level the playing field and make things simple? The VAT effort alone, if that effort is concluded and concluded quickly enough, that alone makes it business friendly. So on that score, and we're talking about an aggregate score, I would say the three things that will matter to us in order to call it business friendly: exchange rates, inflation, or the prices, and these two are interlinked, and then simplification and leveling of the playing field. VAT alone qualifies that, meets that hurdle, amongst other efforts.
On the business-friendly scale and ranking, what would be your personal ranking or score in terms of looking at this budget as a CEO of a financial group, and how would you rate it?
I would rate it a 2 out of 3.
Wow.
Yes, a 2 out of 3. And I would have rated it higher, except that we don't know when this VAT issue.
Or 2 out of 3, or 2 over 10, or
no, 2 over 3.
Okay.
Or if you like, 6.5 over 66%.
I mean, for you, would you see this budget as business friendly?
Obviously. I mean,
what makes you think
things that they have said? I mean, for businesses, there are key indicators that we look out for, that we say the environment is friendly. And one, as they have said, is the exchange rate. It's something you have complained over and over again. And you see a clear indication of how they are going to stabilize it. These are intentions anyway. The implementation is different. If you look at it, a clear indication of how they are going to stabilize the exchange rate. Also, together with inflation, I mean, to project that you are going to achieve inflation of 11.9 which I
From
think
this
is overambitious.
Yes.
It means that you have something that in mind, but they have also listed a number of things that they are going to do. If you look at them, well, if you look at our inflation, a chunk of it is coming from food inflation.
Yeah.
And they are giving a clear indication of what they are going to do. The 1.5 billion to the agricultural sector, the Nkukon and all those things. And then also ensuring that we process some of the things that we produce. So that
Some have said that we've had this before.
that is what I'm saying.
We've had this before.
That's what I'm saying is that now we are looking at the intention they have put forward. The implementation is different. But on the face of the intentions, we are saying that at least we give them 60%. Because you have inflation, you have exchange rate, you also have a clear case of how the government is going to support the private sector. I have an issue with where government procures goods from outside, when largely we have some of the goods here that the government can procure. So the government said that for this year, a chunk of the procurement is going to drive made in Ghana goods. Let's see what the government is going to do. If the government decide that, even for the sanitary pads and other things, we have companies that are producing them.
And that's where the concerns are. You are in the commerce space. Some are saying that give reliefs to industries they can produce to subsidize this and right, rather than the political entrepreneurs who come from somewhere else and they're always there
So
when there's a change in government.
That it should be competitive enough that if
Do you see that as a problem then?
You see, it's a problem.
Yeah.
But we all of us will have to address this. If they can achieve all the things that they have stated in this budget, we should move away from politicizing things and get the people who can do the work and do it very well. If you need sanitary pads and there are businesses that you know can produce them at a
The manufactured
price,
fact that they
yes,
can do that.
just
Give them the incentives
give them
and
the
they will do it.
incentives to produce and they will do it. If you don't do it, you are not going to achieve what you said in terms of inflation, in terms of other things that, even in terms of exchange rate. You can't achieve them if you do anything different from what you are saying. So on the face of it, I would say that is business friendly. Because look, before they came out with this budget, they have engaged all of us. And I see some of the things, some of the proposals that we have made to them being captured in the budget. Some are also not in it. So in that score, it means that, in fact, they listen. If you look at the national economic dialogue we had, if you look at the SONA that we presented, if you look at the engagement with the business community, even those at the market, things that the people say, let's do it this way. And we think that when we do it this way, it's going to help us. Some of them are fairly reflected. But they are challenged in the sense that you cannot do some of them immediately. I mean, you can't. Where we go to from the crisis, if you want to come out of it, it's not going to be an overnight. People will have to sacrifice. Individuals, the business will have to sacrifice. So all of us at this moment will have to support them. And look, every quarter we should monitor this budget.
Mr. Jackson, there are some who said that. In the American theory and the Donald Trump theory, he believes that give businesses tax breaks, they will expand, they will employ, and all the rest. There are certain taxes that have been taken off that should bring some relief. And I'll come to you. That should bring some relief to businesses like yours. Are you going to pass on that benefits to us as consumers?
First of all, right, let's take the most obvious one from the financial sector.
Yeah.
It's rates are coming down. But the key rate, the reference rate, we're yet to see the MPC meet and bring those rates down.
Could be the end of this month, yeah.
Could be the end of this month. And I believe it will be passed on. The drop in rates, if it continues, will be passed on.
Is that an assurance from you?
Oh, it is.
Yeah, okay.
Remember that the financial sector is competitive.
There will be a headline tomorrow.
No, the financial sector is competitive.
Okay.
If rates come down, if I'm not proactive about it, my competitors will be.
Right. That is the rate. Let's hold that constant. What about the taxes as well in the budget that he actually introduced the bill in Parliament today to try and actualize the plan to scrap them? Would you businesses pass on that benefit or that relief? It might not necessarily be in a pricing of a product, but...
First of all, remember that businesses also paid e-levy.
Okay.
That will be passed on.
Okay.
That's the easiest one to pass on. You paid e-levy.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, businesses don't pay sports betting tax.
Okay.
So we are not about to pass on sports betting tax. At least the betting companies should pass it on.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
But it's e-levy. That's the most prime one. The other taxes that we should pass on will be passed on. If VAT goes down, I can't charge you VAT if VAT has gone down. So to that extent, the consumer should be is in a good space. These are not taxes that I can choose to apply or not to apply. If VAT is simplified and the effective VAT rate comes down to, say, 19%, you're going to enjoy that.
I'm looking at the impact of these taxes on your cost build-up in the services industry.
It will impact on the cost build-up,
yeah, so if
it will even impact on the prices you pay. So to the extent that e-levy is scrapped, to the extent that we are waiting for VAT to be simplified and hopefully the effective rate dropped, you should be expectant that you're going to get some reliefs.
The same thing comments.
But George, I think we should be a bit careful here, not to pretend as if everything is okay and we're out of the woods.
I thought we were out of the woods.
No, we are obviously not out of the woods.
Based on a very confident budget.
If something is done about the VAT, as he said, that is direct, so you can feel it. And the e-levy. But other costs are still there. So we don't expect that with just these two taxes being removed, you go and the thing has dropped from 10 cedis to 5 cedis. No, it won't happen. Because the other cost of production, and some of these things, the real effect will be felt in 4 or 5 months. It's not going to be like tomorrow you go and you see price dropping. Because one, the VAT has not been done. The CD in itself is still dancing, it's still depreciating.
All of a sudden we've seen some
the interest rate, as it's still now, until probably the new policy rates are now, it's still as it is. So don't let us send a signal out there that because they have removed e-levy and other things, tomorrow you go and the prices are down. It won't happen. But with time, as things improve, and we see, once we see inflation coming down, in simple terms, it means that the rate at which you would have bought that product had gone down. And that is a signal that is sending. But that inflation that you see there, 11.9, is not tomorrow. It's at the end of the year inflation. In between, there could be highest. The inflation could go down and then it could come down. So it's the average that they have. So prices for now will somehow will be stabilized. But the drop is not going to be significant. So tomorrow you go to market, pick as much as you can. Don't go expecting that things will drop. But for me, it's a good start for all of us.
Uncle Joe, I mean, there are some who are saying that the biggest elephant here is inflation. So, yeah, let's see those drastic measures being taken to contain inflation.
Listen, let's be clear. Inflation is the rate of increase. A drop in inflation does not mean there's a drop in price. Yeah. A drop in inflation, and I like to give this example. Yeah. If there was something I bought at the beginning of 2002, January, for 100 cedis, and they said inflation, end year inflation was 50%, it just means that at the end of December...
The rate of increase has slowed, I mean.
No, the price has gone from 100 to 150. Now, if in the next year, 2023, they say end year inflation is now 33%, all it means is that the item that I started buying at 100, that I bought at the end of that year for 150, it has now increased again and gone from 150 plus a third, plus another 50, and it is at 200. So even though inflation has dropped from 50% to 33% in 2023, the price still has gone up from 100 to 150 to 200. And if in 2024, it has now dropped to 25%, do you know what that means? It means the item is now gone up 25% of 200. No, not of the 100 though.
No.
Of the 200.
You have calculated.
So it has now gone up to 250. So guess what? What I used to buy at 100 cedis, even though inflation went up and has come down, it is now 250 cedis. If the year-end inflation is 10%, it doesn't mean the price has dropped. It means that now it has gone from 100 to 150 to 200 to 250, and it will end at 275 cedis. It has not dropped in price. So let's be clear. Inflation is cumulative. Inflation is the rate of increase. It is not, when you see inflation has dropped, don't go to the market expecting that prices have dropped. Prices don't drop. Not in this part of town.
The issue about inflation, inflation is a derived indicator.
Okay.
It comes about from a number of other indicators. For our inflation, it's a whole lot of complex nature of it. You have food in it, you have even imported inflation, you have exchange rate playing a role. So until all these indicators are doing well, until all of them stabilize, you can't have the 11.9 that we are talking about. If interest rates should go up, because the government is going to finance this deficit from the domestic market, high appetite. If interest rates should go up, you are not likely to achieve the 11% because businesses are going to borrow at a high interest rate, and the cost will be passed on to consumers. It's a very more complex thing than the way we see it. It's a derived indicator. But once you say you are going to achieve it, the things that are causing inflation are supposed to be your target.
I'll come to you on the incentives that government has rolled out for the business sector. And you talked about tracking the budget. In US, there's a budget office. I think we also have some here in Ghana. So in how do we ensure that we are on track and all these incentives as well, and we try and wrap up this. So let me also bring in Vish Ashagba. So Vish, for you, what are the threats to this budget? I mean, is it the externalities? Because there's something that is happening on the market. I mean, crude prices are still coming down. Until this week, the city was also doing quite stable. I mean, what are the threats to this budget from the perspective of that businesses should be worried about when they see those signs or indicators?
Yes, George, there are always external threats, right? So those threats are there. The budget could be derailed or pushed one way or the other, depending on what happens in the external environment. But, we can't really control too much of that. So it's not something we should seek to control. We should be aware of it. We should be conscious of it, but we must be prepared to be agile enough to adjust. So for me, what is more important, back to the issue about discipline, is how we conduct ourselves with the things that are under our control. So we're talking here about things like commitments, controlling the commitment, making sure that we don't overspend. And so I like the emphasis that the minister put in the budget about tightening the public financial management system. He did indicate, which is something we've discussed before, that the rules are there, but the implementation has been poor. So what really often causes us problems as a country, and then that filters down to businesses, is that when we go, spending without regard to the external environment, then we are caught short. So yes, threats exist, but we can only mitigate those threats by putting ourselves in as strong a position as possible. So for me, the solution really is to try and be as self-dependent as possible, not just from a public financial management discipline point of view, but also trying to diversify the economy, again, as was set out in the budget, towards more industrialization, towards more self-sufficiency in agriculture, and towards more export orientation as opposed to import orientation, so that we're not so dependent on external factors. We cannot exclude them altogether. The world is a smaller place and there's globalization all over. But the more we can do for ourselves, the more we can mitigate those threats. So we can't run away from it. But again, I think self-discipline would really help us a lot in this regard.
But Mr. Shebu, you've spoken about external threats. What about the internal threats as well? I mean, we are not in an election year, so maybe that's good for us. But what are the concerns here where we end up initiating projects outside the government system. What are some of the internal threats as well? Because you told us that this budget is an intention. What are some of the internal threats that could, again, derail things for us and things will get out of hand?
Yes, absolutely, George. The internal threats largely boil down to, let me say, the nature of man, right? It's human beings. We're all human beings, and it's down to us to implement this budget. We must have the will, and we must stay the course. So obviously, the politicians are the ones who run things, and we look to them to send the right signals, to lead by example. To be honest, I think that's where the largest threat is. It's the human element. And to the extent that we can, or the politicians can show leadership, I think the business community will follow. To me, that's essentially the largest threat. I'm hoping that with everything that has happened, all that we've gone through over the last few years, and where we are today in terms of what we've seen, our arrears, the debts that are staring us in the face, that we don't need too much more encouragement to behave properly.
Mr. Jackson, I mean, you are nodding your head. I mean, some are saying that, again, I stand to be educated. Hasn't that always been the cycle? After election year, we get into that mode of correction. Things stabilize mid-year. You get to elections and things get out of hand.
Well, to the extent that that has been the pattern, nobody can deny it, right? And we have to be grateful that at least there's a pattern that is positive at this time. A pattern that will be, say, we will be disciplined. There will be fiscal discipline. We will be careful about our spending. We will try to do things right. To that extent, you're right. If you think back, that was the same thing we did when we called for HIPIC. We just remained disciplined for 2 years, and then it's aftermath. And it is sad that even when we were in an IMF program, we still managed to overspend. But at this moment, let's thank God for small mercies. It's the beginning of the cycle. There's not an overly pressing need to overspend. I will take that small mercy. I will be cautiously optimistic that we've stopped digging in the hole and that we're going to get out of it.
Just quickly, let me get your thoughts on the incentives that have been, the initiatives that are being undertaken. I mean, there's this sanitary parts thing, and some are saying that, let's watch it, political entrepreneurs. Why don't you extend incentives to industries for them to produce at a cheaper rate? Let's look at the box of incentives to the business sector and programs, and what do you make of that one as well?
I'll be honest with you. When you take the quantum of businesses and the sanitary part, it's not going to move the needle. If that is what is required politically, let it go. Let's focus on the things that matter. Sanitary parts won't move the needle in any way. It's not going to add even 0.1% to our GDP, whether it's done locally or not. It is doing the right thing, possibly for the right reasons. Let it go. Let's focus on the things that matter. Some of the things that matter have to do with the issues of the public finance management system, the PFM.
Letting it bite.
Letting it bite. Making sure that we don't put out...
How do we get around that challenge?
You see, the rules are there. It was just not implemented. Let's implement those rules. Let's implement those rules. Let's show the renewed commitment to getting the rules. And the rules will help everybody. As a financial institution, I'll be more comfortable lending to somebody doing some work in the public sector.
Lending to me as well.
Lending to you. If I know, well, lending to you, I don't mind.
Okay.
It's lending to you if you're doing something for the government, and then it gets tricky because I'm not sure whether you get paid or not.
Okay.
So once there's an assurance that if that contract is put out, it will get paid and it will get paid on time. It actually brings the rates down for everybody and allows us to do business better. So those are some of the things that we look for. we're looking out for. At this moment, the government is the biggest employer, the biggest subcontractor, right?
Mark, I mean, what do you make of on these collective of measures that they are trying to roll out for businesses, these incentives and programs, initiatives as well?
George, if these intentions are implemented, I see a very positive outturn for Ghana. My concern was how the 24-hour economy was presented.
Yeah, I forgot that.
Because it's supposed to be the main driver for our economy and also for private sector. But I was expecting that there will be some very...
Are you shocked that still there is nothing?
In fact, I'm very shocked because this idea was mooted long ago and has been part of their manifesto. So they should, at this point, know exactly what they were going to do. But for the minister to come and say we are going to come back, I wasn't happy.
Worried?
Yes, I was worried because it's the main driver.
Are you ready? Then they are announcing that it should be private sector led.
No, but all these things, the government cannot do it.
Yeah. Are you ready to lead this thing?
We are ready to support. You see, this 24-hour economy is not going to operate in a different economy. It's still in Ghana economy. So if you want it to work, then you have to create the right environment in Ghana. Let's behave that 24-hour economy the way we mentioned it that is working. If interest rate is 35%, 24-hour economy, whoever is doing it, will not go into a bank and borrow at 20%. If the cedi is still depreciating the way it is, then if you are importing anything, you still have to get that dollar to be able to import. But the other things, for me, the support to agri sector and the fact that they are looking to enhance exports and also ensure that we reduce import. This has been the challenge. This is the structure that we've been talking about, the way of changing the structure of economy. And it's not the first time this thing has been said in any budget. In every year, every budget you have had, you go through, you see this, we are going to reduce import, we are going to export more. In the end, we don't get it done. So if you're able to implement this, I'm sure that will go somewhere.
Vish, Ashagbo, your final thought on this budget going forward and now we should be on track as you try and draw the curtain down. Your final thought, Mr. Ashagbo.
Yeah, final thoughts from me. I think the budget is indeed business friendly in principle. But like everybody has said, it's a matter of implementation. So I look forward to the dialogues that the minister has promised with the private sector. I think he said quarterly. It was in reference to tax, but I'm sure we can broaden it out to the business environment in general. But overall, a positive start. Thanks.
Uncle Jackson, your final thoughts?
Positive start. I like that phrase. Positive start. It was a high wire balancing act, but they got it right. Let's look at how it's implemented. Let's look at seeing it implemented quickly. Delays will kill it, right?
I think we have to make it work, and they cannot do it without the support from the private sector. They should stimulate private sector activity, and Ghana will move forward.
I know the debate will still go on in your homes and offices about whether they could have done more in making this budget more business-friendly, but again, the Chief Executive of Daily Finance, Mr. Joe Jackson, joining me in studio here. Omagbedua Baje is the Chief Executive of Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and also Vish Ashagbo, a senior country partner at accounting and finance firm PwC Ghana. And I'll say immense thanks to my guests in studio. It was raining cats and dogs, but they managed still to be here for us to have the discussion. Indeed, immense thanks, Mr. Jackson, immense thanks, Mr. Omagbedua Baje. And also, Mr. Ashagbo, I know where you are right now, but indeed, you still made time to join us as well. We do really appreciate so much. This has been PM Express Business Edition. The debate, the argument will still go on, but know that, listen, it's all about the country and what we can do to stabilize things for everyone. Have a great day.